The global food war, how Trump's tariff strategy is changing the world. You weren't supposed to notice it. Just paperwork, customs codes, and quiet digits buried in trade logs. But on April 2nd, 2025, President Trump's 145% tariff hit like a detonation. What started as policy quickly morphed into a blockade. Within days, China, India, and Europe hit back with embargoes, and Brazil's ports were gridlocked. U.S. silos began overflowing, and in places like Jakarta and Lagos, people took to the streets rioting for rice. Corn in Europe surged over 400 euros per ton, and Indonesian rice inflation spiked above 21%. This isn't just inflation, this is a food war. The question now is, what happens when food becomes a weapon and you're on the wrong side of the trigger? The tariffs begin, a shock to the system. April 2nd, 2025, dubbed Liberation Day by President Trump, marked the day that 145% tariffs on $300 billion worth of Chinese goods came into effect. The tariffs targeted everything from agricultural machinery to base ingredients used in U.S. food processing. By May, the effects hit fast. U.S. pork exports plummeted by 36% year over year, soybean futures fell 8.2% in just 3 days, and dairy shipments to China, worth $584 million annually, were completely halted. According to the U.S. Foreign Agricultural Service, the Port of Oakland reported a 42% reduction in outbound grain containers during the last 2 weeks of April. This isn't a supply disruption, it's economic suffocation, said Joseph Glover, former USDA chief economist, in a May 5th interview with Bloomberg. Input costs also soared as fertilizer imports from Tunisia faced a 28% tariff and dropped 47% since January. Trump's promise of domestic revitalization quickly turned into contract cancellations, silos overflowing with unsold inventory, and food prices climbing in cities from St. Louis to San Diego. And that was before the retaliations even began. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Stay tuned for more updates and content. We've got plenty more coming your way. China's retaliation, a door slammed shut. China didn't just walk away from U.S. grain exports. It slammed the door, bolted it, and welded it shut. Just hours after China confirmed a 34% retaliatory tariff on all U.S. imports, soybean futures on the Chicago Board of Trade dropped by 8.2% in a single trading session, while corn prices fell by 5.6%. By May 3rd, Chinese state-backed importers had signed contracts for over 2 million metric tons of Brazilian soybeans, paying up to $22 per ton more than U.S. rates. According to Reuters, China was willing to pay a premium solely to sidestep American suppliers. The American Soybean Association called this a total market loss, and USDA economists revised their 2025 U.S. soybean export forecast downward by $1.9 billion. Farmers in Iowa and Indiana began reporting storage overflow as their grain elevators filled up with unsold product. "We've been priced out of our own market," said John Heistifer, an Iowa farmer and former ASA chairman. Canada, the unintended casualty of U.S. policy. Canada didn't impose tariffs, yet it was hit almost as hard as the U.S. When Prime Minister Mark Carney publicly reaffirmed Canada's alignment with U.S. trade policy on April 28th, China responded by imposing a 100% tariff on Canadian canola oil, valued at over 3.5 billion Canadian dollars annually. This action froze outbound shipments from Alberta and Saskatchewan, where nearly 80% of Canada's canola is produced. Prices plummeted 17% within just 2 days, and major grain handlers like Viterra and Richardson International reported delayed export contracts worth millions. "It's not policy, it's punishment," said Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, accusing Beijing of weaponizing trade. China's Ministry of Commerce dismissed the claim, calling it reciprocal enforcement. The message was clear. Loyalty to Washington now comes with an agricultural cost. The European Union strikes back. In response to U.S. tariffs on European aluminum and steel, the EU imposed a 25% levy on U.S. corn. This move cut off a supply that had replaced lost Ukrainian grain since 2022. Feed producers in Spain, Germany, and the Netherlands, who had sourced over 4 million tons of U.S. corn in 2024 alone, were forced to pivot. Within a week, European corn importers were paying 12 to 15% more for Brazilian and South African corn. The National Association of Spanish Feed Manufacturers warned that pork prices could rise by 18% by June as domestic supply contracts evaporated. "This isn't a flex, it's a self-inflicted wound," said Dr. Lars Petrovic, an agricultural economist at Wageningen University. Brussels spared U.S. soybeans for now, but the next review is in December. And if soy is added to the tariff list, EU livestock sectors already battling high energy costs could face a much steeper cliff. Poland, Hungary, and Romania's unilateral moves. Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, and Romania didn't wait for Brussels. They acted unilaterally in April 2025, banning Ukrainian grain imports to protect local markets from flooding. The four countries, which imported nearly 11 million metric tons of Ukrainian wheat and corn in 2024, moved to halt imports due to surging local anger over collapsing prices. Farmers in Poland and Hungary argued that Ukrainian grain was undercutting domestic produce by as much as 30 to 40%. Ukraine, still fighting Russian aggression in the Black Sea, labeled the bans as a betrayal. The European Commission validated the bans, effectively narrowing Ukraine's remaining overland routes and weakening the EU's unity. This decision may shield local farmers from unrest. The unraveling of American trade, protectionism gone wrong. Trump's tariff strategy was billed as protectionism, but is now producing scarcity on both sides of the border. The U.S. imports 16% of its food supply, yet now faces a 28% fertilizer tariff from Tunisia and 25% fruit and vegetable duties from Mexico and Canada. The increased cost of inputs is already dragging down yields, with USDA projections showing a 3.4% drop in corn acreage planted this season. Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget like and subscribe for the latest updates on global politics.